I'm sure you've heard them tell you how you perfect a security interest. You've heard about that, right? And we've went over that in other videos. But have you ever heard of someone tell you how to perfect the release of a lien? You have to know both ends. If you know how to perfect a lien, then sure enough, if you don't know how to perfect the release of a lien, then you've yet to become a master at what you're doing. You have to know how both sides work. A lien that is released is not terminated. To release something is to just loosen it up, to just let it go, but it's still flowing out there. It is still flowing out there. In other words, assuming you did a release of lien and you did it properly, you can still use this form and assign it. You can assign it to someone else. That floating cargo out there, see, you can give it to someone else and say, here you go, I have untied the knot to this rock or to this dock and I've handed it to you as the captain. Now, this rope attached to that ship and all the cargoes and values in it, which is the contract and all the stuff that you put in UCC-1, is now yours. That's called assignment. The Uniform Commercial Code, Termination of Encumbrance, UCC-3, UCC Financing Statement Amendment. In the past, I've mentioned several things regarding the Uniform Commercial Code. One of it being, every time you see the numbers that follows the names of these forms, such as UCC-3, know that primarily the articles in Uniform Commercial Code governs them. For instance, Article 3 speaks of negotiable instruments. The UCC-3 form amendment cannot exist absent of negotiable instruments. Negotiable instruments are what creates terms and conditions when it comes to things like collateral, which are interest or items that is used as a substitute for what that negotiable portion of the instrument speaks of, if the conditions cannot be met. Collateral, which are interest or items that is used as a substitute for what that negotiable portion of the instrument speaks of, if the conditions cannot be met. Interest being the positions of the party. Instrument means any type of agreement that creates a position, performance, and gives right of enforcement and right of remedies, generally speaking. Now, considering that the Uniform Commercial Code often jumps around by making reference to either Article 9 and Article 3 or Article 1 and Article 7, so and so, because all of these are generally perceived as one, but they broke it into section based on the stages of development. But they broke it into section based on the stages of development. But they broke it into section based on the stages of development of the different types of contract, and from the level of simplicity to complexity of the different types of contract. Hence you have Article 1, 2, 2A, 3, 4, 4A, 5, all the way till 9. As a side note, I've briefly mentioned this in other videos. There are other portions to the UCC that are not public that does exist, but I digress. Considering that different parts of the UCC make reference to other parts, whenever you see forms such as the UCC-3, that primarily is governed by the articles based on the numbering of the UCC form. I mean, think about it. The UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, is one of the very few bodies of, let's say, rules that actually has its own form dedicated to it. Have you ever thought about that? How somewhat unusual that is? Uniform Commercial Code has its own sets of forms just for it. Now, this may be the case with other forms of legislature, but it is very rare for you to then see the name of it on its face directly, dedicated just for it. This goes to show that UCC is something that is very powerful. And considering the import of this same Uniform Commercial Code we speak of here, and considering that it speaks of other section within each of its particular articles, would have other options relating to the enforcement of that article embedded onto the face of the form that governs the article. UCC 9, Secured Transaction. You know that UCC 3 deals with a negotiable instrument. If you know what a negotiable instrument is, you know how to create a non-negotiable instrument. For it deals with the account and how you create default relating to negotiable or non-negotiable, which is UCC 3. UCC 5 is how you use that birth certificate, aka letter of credit, within contract. UCC 8 is how it is turned into securities. 9 is what really gives you the keys to the stepping stone to what you do with 3, 4, 4A, 5, and 8. Hence this video, or with the exception of what's in Article 9, Article 3 would always heavily reference Article 9. Article 3 speaks of negotiable instruments, and normally speaking, it makes sense that it heavily references Article 9 because Article 9 naturally deals with secured transaction. Negotiable instruments have to be secured in some ways. Non-negotiable instruments are easier to deal with, enforce, or just keep it dormant without a secured interest. But negotiable instruments, most of the time, require secured interest, which automatically makes Article 3, which deals with negotiable instruments, tied with secured transaction. So anything you're dealing with when it comes to negotiable instrument is a type of transaction, not always, but usually have to be secured. In other words, the fact that the instrument or the contract is negotiable, meaning it is mutable based on other things outside of what is readily stipulated on the face of whatever contract you're dealing with. It has to, in some ways, be tied together. That knot or that rope that ties it together is called secured. Something has to secure it. Think of securing it as mooring a boat onto some type of anchor or some type of rock or some type of stable building. That stable building or the rock has something that is attached to, something that is made of, likely different from the boat that you're mooring, so that the boat doesn't casually float along with a wave and get lost at sea, or go along with the conditions of the weather. That's what a secure transaction is. You are securing the mutable portion of the instrument called negotiable instrument. So when you look very closely onto this wonderful form called UCC-3, governed primarily by Article 3 of the UCC, for those who have eyes to see, when they start seeing words like termination, they know automatically that termination is in Article 9, because termination deals with, although keep in mind in this video we're going over the general one so that you can basically look for that same verbiage or section at your state equivalent of UCC, which I always recommend because it makes it easier to enforce if worse comes to worse, but usually it wouldn't. But at best, it makes it easier to enforce because it's something that relates to the jurisdiction immediately. I then provided certain caveats and certain references, certain verbiage of the references when it comes to terminating statements. In this particular explanation, I give them the verbiage of how to release a lien. The release of lien is one thing, but then it is also good to also terminate the entire contract using a form that correlates to the UCC1 that you use to create the lien. A form that correlates to the UCC1 that you use to create the lien is UCC-3. See, compared to UCC1, UCC-3 is far more sophisticated, extremely sophisticated. And if you're not careful, you can use it wrong. But in this instance, what we are going to focus on is how to release a lien. Half of it has been explained in this post. The other half is being explained in this video. Termination is what you be clicking once you do that release of lien notice. The intriguing part about this that you must know is that that release of lien notice will not be placed here as a collateral at all. The way you use collateral in UCC-3 is completely different as the way you use collateral in UCC-1. The way you use collateral in UCC-3 is contingent upon what you choose here. And I'm providing you this caveat earlier on because most people will assume, well, if I'm releasing a lien, then naturally speaking, once I get to this particular portion on item number 8, I will click delete collateral. That is not what you are doing. You click delete collateral if you want to partially remove certain liabilities and keep others active. So say in UCC1, the financial statement which established the lien that you initially created once upon a time, and you had about 3 different collateral. Let's assume one of it is in that promissory note, aka that negotiable instrument. You added the social security number as one collateral in item number 19 for those who have the note. And then you added, say, the birth certificate as another collateral. Or you didn't even use that particular note, or you use other notes that I show in the course as to how you put a lien on your bank account and how you put a lien on your own real property for good. As far as this form is now different from what you thought you would need when you initially structured it, all right, no problem, not the end of the world. There's always a solution. Let's do it and let's move forward. You start here by making this box A, B, and C the same thing as UCC1. This is the first thing they use to corroborate the reference in case you make any mistake in item number 1. But I implore you to do your best not to. Item number 1 now is the file number that makes reference to that original UCC1 that you are trying to do something to. The way you perfect the release of a lien is by terminating it. The way that you perfect the release of a lien is by terminating it. I trust you comprehend that just based on everything we've described up to this point. Cool. Item number 3, you leave it be. You leave item number 3 alone. Just casually go by your way. Leave it alone. Item number 4, you leave it alone. Just leave it alone. You just casually go by your way. All right, cool. Item number 5 is the same way. Just leave it alone. The reason is because you've already completed item number 1A, which already shows the name of the debtor, and you are not changing any of those. 5 is to change or substitute debtors under the circumstances that you're continuing it for certain purposes or assigning it for other purposes, but you're not even doing any of that. Leave 1B, 3, 4, and 5 alone. Now, 6, current record information. Complete for party information change. In other words, item number 6 is contingent upon what you do with number 5. So if you don't fill number 5 out, you don't have to fill out item number 6 at all. And of course, the same applies to item number 7. You leave 1B, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 alone. And guess what? See this word again, change? You are not doing that at all. So guess what you do? You'll leave item number 8 alone also. Just leave it alone. Don't even do NA. Just leave them alone and just go by your own way. Number 9, name of secured party of record authorizing this amendment. Provide only one name. There we go. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. Provide only one name. If this is an amendment authorized by a debtor, click here. The rubber meets the road here because this right here lets you know whether the creditor or the debtor is the one that is authorizing this. The creditor, whoever is the creditor in that UCC1 is the one that should be authorizing this because they have the uppermost hand and leaves any opportunity for dispute when it comes to this termination out of the equation. And even if there was an error, usually if the creditor terminates, I don't think the debtor would be what we're looking for. Is right here. D, person entitled to file certain amendments. Certain amendments. This certain is relating to the specific way you use that amendment beyond the general portion of, okay, I'm just changing names, I'm changing addresses, I'm adding collateral. Okay, right. A person may file an amendment other than an amendment that adds collateral covered by the financing statement or an amendment that adds a debtor to a financing statement only if 1. The secured party of record authorizes the filing, or the amendment is a termination statement for a financing statement as to which the secured party of record has failed to file or send a termination statement as required by 9-513A or C. The debtor authorizes the filing. In other words, something that is signed. As far as this particular portion of the UCC is concerned, when you see authenticated, it's referring to something that is signed or attested to. But let's just read it nonetheless. Authenticate means to sign. 9-519. Numbering, maintaining, an indexing record, communicating information provided in record. At this point, I'm sure if you filed a regular UCC1, you know they give you a file number. They show you all the stuff of where it was filed, the name of the clerk, the date. All that is according to 9-519. But we're not here to even look at all that other stuff, because if you just look at a face of a UCC that's filed, you already see all that. What we're looking for in 9-519 is the core of what we care about. It's this part that says timeliness of filing office performance, meaning their liability. In other words, if you're wondering, okay, I filed this termination form, how soon do they have to give me a confirmation that they've done something to it? The filing office shall perform the act required by subsection A, which is through E, at the time and in the manner prescribed by a filing office rule. But no later, meaning whatever their internal records are, it must be no later. It shall be no later than 2 business days. In other words, if you're filing on Friday, Monday, Tuesday. Tuesday is the 2 business days. No later than 2 business days after the filing office receives the record in question. I'm showing this part, even though to some of you might not be necessary, but I've had people file UCC-3 for the purpose of perfecting a release of lien through termination, and the one who was involved, who acted as a secured party. Now, the one filing in this particular instance, example that I'm giving as a debtor, the one who was the one acting as a secured party against them was plain dumb. And the moment that they saw that it was in the process of being indexed, they filed a continuation statement. That is to say, within the 2-day period that the office has a responsibility to file that termination that you're doing, if assuming you're doing it as a debtor, whoever it is that is the creditor, if they find it out before those 2-day period and they file a continuation, they can block that termination. Just so you know, that's a little slight key from experience that UCC won't tell you. But what it does tell you is you have 2 days before you get the confirmation as a mandate. And this 1-year period is repeated over and over and over and over. I'm just going to let you know that this matters. But if all you're doing is perfecting a release of lien by termination, no big deal. You don't have to worry about this 1-year period. Just get a certified copy of it. Moving on.